trying.
We are live.
Excellent. I call this Milburn School District 24 Board of Education regular board meeting to order on October 27th, 2025 at 7 p.m. Ms. Sully, will you please call the roll?
Jennifer Goodwin. Here. Chris Hamilton.
Here.
Erica Peterson.
Here.
Jillian Phelps. Here. John Ruggles.
Here.
Brad Scottrum.
Here.
And Lisa Brewster.
All right, please rise for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, number 4, public comments. Ms. Sully, are there any?
No, we do.
Okay, moving on. Number 5, non-action items. Does anybody want to add anything to the agenda? Okay, our fiscal year 25 audit presentation.
Change glasses.
No problem.
I always think I can do it and then I look. But. Good evening, I'm Kathy Norton from Excelsior, your audit firm, and I just wanted to come in, touch base on how the audit went and just discuss the financials, just give you a little bit of a, just an overview of what you're looking at when you're actually looking at your audit and financial. First, I always want to mention how it went in terms of the whole process, and as usual, Carly and her team were extremely organized, really responsive. It makes our job so much easier, so we really appreciate that. As part of the audit, we evaluate the district's internal controls over financial reporting, and we test those controls. All of the controls that we looked at appear appropriate. They're appropriately designed and they seem to be implemented and working effectively. We occasionally make recommendations as part of that process. And whenever we have recommendations, management is always willing to listen to our advice and make those changes whenever needed. So we appreciate that as well. In terms of what most people are looking for, whether there was a management letter, meaning issues that were significant, that we would put those recommendations, et cetera, in writing. And I'm happy to let you know there were no findings, nothing reportable this year. So that's really always very good news for you. And then I'm going to just talk a little bit about the audit report, which I assume you have.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just, and again, if you want to follow along, great. If you don't, I totally get it. I'll try not to go too fast, but I will just mention a few pages throughout this. I know it's kind of a little thick packet you have here. So as far as significant changes for fiscal 25's report compared to 24, one major change is that you'll notice there's no federal section to your report. So the district was not subject to what we call a single audit or an audit of your federal programs. Because the expenditures of federal grants were less than $750,000 for fiscal 25. A lot of that ESSER money, et cetera, stuff that was spent over the last couple of years bumped the district up, over that threshold, well over that threshold, and in most of those years, that's all taken care of. That's all down. Federal funding, again, not as significant, and probably going forward, it's going to continue that way. And one of the big reasons for that is that the threshold for requiring a single audit is actually increasing to $1 million. So again, less likely that going forward, the district is going to have to have a single audit or federal audit. And again, unless there's some kind of program that district receives funding for. So related to that. So that's a good chunk of your audit is gone as a result of that change. All right, let's see if I can get it to move through there. All right. So in terms of what you actually are looking at in your packet, there's a table of contents that kind of guides you. But one of the, probably the most important piece of the report is actually the audit opinion. And the opinion is on page 1 after the table of contents. And basically what this is telling you that there's an unmodified opinion. As far as the financial statements, an unmodified opinion is a clean opinion, if you're familiar with clean or not clean in terms of an audit. What that means is that the financial statements included in this report present fairly the financial position, the results of operations, et cetera, of the district. And what present fairly doesn't mean they're exactly perfect or 100% accurate. It means that they're free from material misstatements. So there are no major misstatements of finances here. A second piece of the opinion that goes along with this is a report on internal control over financial reporting and also compliance with laws and regulations. We test all of that. We don't provide a specific opinion about that, but again, there was nothing that came to our attention that would require any other further reporting, et cetera. The third section of the audit then is the management's discussion and analysis. It starts on page 6. So what you're going to see there is a pretty long narrative. It provides some highlights, financial highlights, comparisons. It talks about some reasoning for different changes and things like that. So you'll get a little bit of a background over the reports that are included in the packet, and then what's included in those reports, and then a little breakdown by fund. Each of the district's funds is defined, and then there will be a little bit of a discussion about major changes that happened in each fund. Again, this is something that is really just a way to describe some of the stuff in the financial statements. So it provides a little bit of explanation for readers who are not necessarily familiar about what's happening, and again, gives you an overview for when you dive into the actual financial statement. After the MD&A, heading to the basic financial statements, they start on page 13. This is the first time you are seeing it. Did you guys get these before? This is tonight, the first time. All right, so when you're staying up tonight to read these later. All right, so the first set of statements that you're going to see are the government-wide financial statements. And so the government-wide financial statements are actually comparable to a business's, typically a larger business's financial statements. So you're going to see the statement of net position, similar to in a business world, like a balance sheet. It's long-term focus. So the statement of net position, again, includes all of the district's long-term resources, including capital assets, deferred outflows that are related to pensions and post-employment benefit plans the district has. It also will describe the various long-term obligations of the district, including long-term debt, and any deferred inflows related to property taxes, pensions, and post-employment benefits. And then it shows at the very bottom, positive net position, shows the district has about $17.6 million in net position. A big portion of that net position is actually restricted, meaning it can't really just necessarily be used for anything. The biggest piece of net position in the district is the fixed assets. So those are the assets, again, long-term assets that the district holds, and that it would be reduced by any debt that's related to those assets. And then anytime there's a restriction, then this means external restrictions on dollars. You're going to see that in the restricted section. So student activity funds, for example, are restricted dollars. District can't just use those for anything. Tort monies are restricted. Certain funds for transportation are restricted, and then the retirement accounts, the IMRF and Social Security accounts, will be restricted as well. Fire prevention and safety has a little bit of restricted money left. Again, can only be used for projects in that area, et cetera, that approved projects, et cetera. And then the unrestricted portion of the district's net position is negative $5 million. The second statement in the government-wide financials is the statement of activities. And this really is just a summary. It's on page 14, sorry if you're following along. These are expenses by program. So in other words, instruction, support services, and so on. And then we'll show the expenses and then the net amount of revenues that were applied against those expenses. And then the bottom half of that shows the general revenues that help cover those programs where the specific revenues don't cover. The bottom line on this is again is similar to an income statement in a business. We would call that, whether it's a profit, again, you're not in the business of a profit, but the change in that position for this year is negative 440,000. Again, remember this takes into account long term, not necessarily on a cash flow basis here. And then there was actually a change in accounting principle this year that resulted in a decrease of $573,000. There's more in the footnotes to that to explain that change. So I'll talk about that in a little bit. So again, this just shows the change in net position, just over, looks like about $1 million. So your net position went down from, the beginning of the fiscal year by about $1 million. The next set of statements are actually the fund financials, which will be the financial statements that are really more used on an operating basis. So it will look closer to what you see on a normal basis for your treasurer's reports and stuff like that. These are based on the current measurement focus. So it doesn't include things like long-term debt, capital assets, etc. So again, more operational, less, future focus. So you'll see on the balance sheet, starting on page 15, the funds are listed across the top, and then you'll see your assets, the liabilities, again, current liabilities that the district has, and then the fund balance. Again, probably something you're more familiar with. We break out fund balance by non-spendable items, which would be something that you can't really spend. So for example, a prepaid expense, you've already paid that. You can't use that money now. It's already really out of your pocket. And then there's restrictions. Again, restrictions are always going to come from outside sources. So an outside source, restricts an outlaw, a regulation, a donor, or something like that. We'll say student activity funds can't be used for anything except for that particular purpose. And then everything that's not restricted could potentially be assigned by the board, that you set aside funds for a particular purpose. And then anything that's not set aside would be unassigned funds. So that's the balance sheet. And then on page, I'm gonna skip a page here and go right to page 17. 17, again, is current measurement focus. It is the statement of revenues, expenditures. And what it's going to show you again across the fund, or across the top rather, are all the funds. The revenues are going to be kind of broken out by things like local funds, things like property taxes, etc. So it really just breaks down the types of revenues that are coming into the district. Again, separates it out by fund, and then lists the expenditures, again, based on function, similar to what you saw in the statement of activities. So regular programs, and within that, regular or rather instructions, you're gonna see regular, special ed, and so on. You'll see support services, community services, debt services, and capital outlay. And then the bottom of that page, there's really the excess or deficiency of revenues over expenditures, but we're not done yet. This actually continues to the next page, and what you will see is any kind of income or expenses related to other financing sources and uses. So these aren't revenues necessarily coming in. It's really just against other different sources that are either coming in, positive increases, or some proceeds, such as proceeds from finance purchases, proceeds from long-term debt, if you have anything like that, loans or leases. And then occasionally you'll see other financing uses, and those would be deducted here as well. So the net of all of that, your regular revenues, expenses, and then these other financing sources and uses will be the change in fund balance. Again, that's your measure of net income if we were looking at, you know, a business financial statement. So overall, in all governmental funds, the district had a negative 184,308 change in fund balance, so that's, you know, very, very minimal change from the prior fiscal. And then on the bottom line is shows the ending fund balances across funds and then total for the district.
So Kathy, if I'm a board member, I'm asking myself or asking you or the district, business manager, superintendent. We had a balanced budget last year. But here it's showing that we decreased our overall fund balance by 184,308.
Yes, so you wanna know why?
I would.
Yes, well, part of that is the district maintains its books on a cash basis for operating purposes, but the financial statements are required to be reported on the accrual basis. So when the district is showing property tax revenue, it's what they've collected. We come in and make some adjustments for things like that. Or revenues earned that have not been collected, or expenses that are incurred but not paid. So on a monthly basis, you're not seeing that, so we do clean that up, but in addition to that, there are things that are required. I think that's why you're nodding your head, because this is what you really want to hear. There are things that are required to be reported in your financial statements, required by ISB, et cetera, that the district doesn't necessarily maintain that up during the year. And they work with us at the end of the year to identify things, so things like a capital lease, or rather an operating lease for copiers is an example, or buses. Last year was big. This year I think we have the new bus lease as well. But those are not really revenues coming into the district. It's as if, but they're required to report as if they got the money to buy those assets and then they spent the money. So we have to show these other uses or expenditures for the buses when it was cash in, there was no cash in, no cash out. And so it skews things. So when you look at what happened in perhaps the other sources and uses, you're going to see things like proceeds from finance purchase, even though it didn't happen. And then something that you would not necessarily expect to see is a big payment out for buses. Even if there was no payment yet, it's reported as if those resources went out. And so that's part of the reason why it looks a little bit different when you don't necessarily budget for those things.
Why do they do that? Just to confuse everybody?
I don't think they deliberately do that, but I think one of the things they try to do is just kind of even the playing field and compare apples to apples. So they just want to make sure that everybody's doing that. This was a GASB pronouncement, a governmental accounting standards board pronouncement from a few years ago requiring that. And again, it's sort of like the district didn't record this asset, but they're using this asset. They didn't record debt because there really is no long-term debt like a bond or a note payable or something like that. But ultimately there's an obligation there. So that's just one of the reasons that they do that. So it's about transparency and making sure that really all of those transactions are captured.
So when we told everybody we were operating on a balanced budget last year, were we?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
We're just not showing it. So if anybody looks, they go, no, it's not, but we're saying, yes, just trust us that we are. It's a.
No, they can see it here. So here's another point that I want to make and why I brought it up. So on page 18, when you look across all the funds and the net change in balances, there's two funds that accumulate money over time for capital projects. That's fire prevention and safety and capital projects. So those monies, we don't necessarily levy every year what we're going to spend every year. Those funds can build up, and then when we're ready to do a project, like a roof, for example, then we take out of that money. So and those don't count on the state. I don't know, fire prevention counts on the state.
For an operating fund, it does not.
So those two
Those
funds,
do not count.
when we give our forms, when Carly does a budget that we just approved and give that form to the state, those two funds are taken out. So that's $300,000 there that don't count when we say we have a balanced budget. For good reason, because it would be it's really inaccurate, because in those funds you're building up small chunks over time. So we levied
$11,000 in fire prevention and safety last year. And spent 211,000.
Exactly. And how was that paid for? That was paid for with fund balance, existing fund balance.
Right, that we had levied in previous years because we have 10 years to spend that money out, so it's a fund that. It's like a piggy bank, and then when you go to do a project, a bigger project. Then you take that money back out in any single year, so. That's why some years it's gonna look like we're a little bit. Our fund balances are actually decreased last year, which is true, that is a fact. And it's also true that we had a balanced budget. It's a little bit tricky to explain it that way, but we have to do that to be accurate.
It's because in all the prior years, we looked at as if we had a positive benefit of those funds coming in. And this one year, it looks lower because we spent all of the money from the prior years.
Yep.
Gotcha.
And the other thing is that, basically, there's a deferral of property tax revenue, meaning the district says that the taxes levied for a particular tax year are going to be used, and it's really actually pushed out 2 fiscal years. So the 2023 tax levy is used in fiscal 25, 2024 levy used in fiscal 26. So there's an amount sitting there. Again, if you're just looking at on a budget basis, like, oh, I'm budgeting X dollars for tax revenue this year. But again, you're setting that aside to pay for future expenses. So again, there's timing differences throughout this report that you're going to see, and that's one. Well, and again, like for example, the change of fund balance in the ed fund, $109,000. If you look at the grand scheme of things and total expenditures or even total fund balances, that's very small, and that is most likely, again, that's potentially a result of these accrual adjustments that we're making. We're reporting here, which is the fair way to look at your financials. We're reporting expenditures that were incurred in fiscal 25 that are not getting paid. It's just, you don't have an invoice yet, et cetera. So those things, there's always little timing differences like that as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All of you?
Yeah, and maybe I should be asking Carly this, when you talk about restricted funds. Are they really restricted or are they fungible?
If they're labeled as restricted, these are restricted by outside sources. So student activity funds by law have to be used for student activities. So those are technically restricted.
But if you're not using your general funds for that activity, it's sort of. Oh, one thing.
But general funds aren't really covering student activities. It's specific revenues that come in related to the various student activities.
Okay, so
And that's all tracked separately. Another example is the tort fund, is restricted. You levy a tax for tort expenditures. And that's why if you didn't spend all that, there's gonna be a restricted fund balance related to that. So no flexibility in some of those things.
okay, and do you? I mean. Next couple of years, money's gonna be tight. I don't know. We're gonna talk about our plans are for the next few years, but then we're gonna be talking about that 1%.
Mhm.
Do you guys give recommendations about that at all, or you're
We don't.
completely on?
Right, we're auditing your historical
You're
numbers,
just auditing.
basically, if we were giving advice on what the district should do, we'd be auditing our own work then, right? So we would be saying, oh, do this, do that, then we're gonna audit your financial statements, so typically, no, we're really just. We're,
Just auditing.
unbiased, yep, we're totally unbiased, so independent, we say is the technical term there, so. We are independent of what has happened, so.
Okay.
Questions? Okay, so. In case you're wondering, because I'm sure everyone's wondering, how do you get from those government-wide statements to the fund financial statements or vice versa? There are 2 pages reconciling the difference. So it's like, how could I have, fund balance of, what it was, $6.9 million, but my net position is 17,590,000. There are 2 pages in here that actually reconcile the difference. It kind of walks you through how do we go from those fund financial statements to the government-wide financial statements. So just again, for your information, those are in between fund financial statements, pages, so on page 19 and page 16. Page 16 and 19 are those reconciliations, just so you can see, this stuff is not included on my fund financial, but it's on this kind of funds. You can kind of, it breaks it down line by line. What's like that. Okay, following those fund financial statements, I love what I do, so I can understand how it's not interesting to everybody, but it's really interesting to me. But following those great financial statements, you're gonna see the notes to the financial statements, which is just, again, it's about 27 pages, and it provides additional details. And again, some narrative, etc., but it supports the numbers that are on the financial statement. So it will break it down. It talks about what are the district's accounting policies, and then from there, it does some line items, things like cash and investments, what's included in cash and investments, what's included in capital assets, long-term debt, etc. So, again, to help in understanding, this will provide the user with, you know, a little bit of background and some details that underlie those amounts that are reported. The last note of the financial statements is on page 47. And page 47, 46 and 47 actually talks about the change in accounting principles. So the GASB required adoption of a new accounting principle related to the district's compensated absences. And as I mentioned, when we looked at the first financial statement, it was a 550 or 500 and some $1,000, 573, I think, adjustment to the net position. And that is related to, again, some new rules. It's sort of like, we want to, you know, have some more transparency, et cetera. So the district adopted this policy, and it required that there was a look back at what compensated absences the district has. And the change in principle, there have always been some compensated absences reported. But what the change has been that the liability for compensated absences has to be reported for leave that has not been used, that has been used but not paid. And then it really kind of just breaks it down, whether the leave accumulates, in other words, use it or lose it. The leave is more likely than not to be used for time off. And so again, it's might not necessarily be cash out on behalf of the district, but if there's time off, there has to be a value on that, or otherwise paid at some point in the future. So again, it really just required a look at what the time off policies are, paid time off, et cetera, and then, you know, a calculation based on whatever the standard requires, and then recorded this amount that's really outstanding in terms of what the district's liability is or obligation is. Again, regardless of whether it's really necessarily cash out or just time off. So, so there's a little background in this note 19, note 18 kind of discusses it a little bit as well. It just kind of shows how we came up with the dollar amount, to report that restatement of your net position from 2024. So we looked at past experience, district policies, and, applied the new standard to come up with that calculation. Right, following the notes to the financial statement is required supplementary information. You'll see the schedule of liabilities, changes in net position for the IMRF pension, the TRS pension, and there's one as well for your teacher's health insurance. Again, we present, the district's required to show 10-year schedules related to those laws, and so there's a little bit of information, again, shows sort of liability on behalf of the district, not necessarily have to pay this, not really expecting necessarily that cash is coming out, but if everything, you know, stopped today and you have had to satisfy those liabilities, these are all based on actuarial calculations, again, assuming about anything about demographics, you know, life expectancy, things like that. So, again, sort of requires to be presented and calculated, but not really necessarily based on, you know, anything currently due and payable. There are budget to actual schedules, so if you did want to drill down as to where the district, had differences between what was budgeted, what the actual expenditures are, those are starting on page 55, I believe, and they go all the way through in the 76. So again, if you'd like to see more detail on how those worked out, those pages are there. It breaks down the expenditures in a little bit more detail than what you see on the financials. There's also some notes to how the budget was determined and whether there was any excess of actual expenditures over budget. And then some supplemental schedules that sort of combine some operating funds to report in the general fund. And finally, the last page is the calculation of the per capita tuition figure. So per capita operating expense per pupil, per capita tuition charge. That's it as far as the financial statement. The other report that we prepare along with the district is the annual financial report for the State Board of Education. And it basically, it's probably not in your packet, but it's something that not sure if it's provided. I'm not sure how you guys actually provide that, but it's public information, so ultimately ends up on the state website. But it's really just it's redundant in that it basically will present the same financial statements you see in your packet in terms of the fund financial statements. There are some other measures and reporting requirements throughout, just based on things that PSB wants highlighted. One of the pages in there is a financial profile score. Again, I mention it, I can't say that it 100% it accurately reflects, and I don't want to say it's not inaccurate, but it doesn't explain some underlying information that would explain these scores. But basically, it's a ranking based in 5 different areas, and it's relating like revenues and expenses, debt, cash on hand, things like that. And it's a 4-point scale, and the district has for 2025 has a 3.65 rating, which is recognition. That's the highest category. That's the highest ranking that you can have. So this is actually up from last year. It was really 3.3 or 3.35 last year. So there's been some improvement. Some of the things that are that are incorporated into these scores are sometimes outside the district's control. Things like these leases. I was talking about these leases. So you issued that. You did really issue that. You signed an agreement to pay for renting buses over 5 years, and that might come into play, have a little bit of impact. So again, it's really the not a lot of control in terms of manipulating numbers for this. It's just measured in the same way, again, consistent from one district to another. Some of it you have, again, a little bit of control over, but it is just a measure that a lot of people like to look at. So I would mention that it actually went up some.
Is that how we're doing compared to others, or how we're doing compared to the standards?
It's every district is gonna have a ranking, so, and they're public, so you could look on ISB to see what other districts has, but this is really just a snapshot in time. As of this date, this is where you sit.
Yes, but it is criterion reference that's what you're asking.
Mhm.
Yes. So every district in the state could get a 4.
Good.
Is that what you were asking?
Yeah.
It's not a curve.
No, yes, okay. Got it. All right, I think that's all I had. Any other questions? Sorry, I feel like I went a long time, but
It's all right.
hopefully it was.
It's important.
Okay.
I have a question for you, just out of my own curiosity, because I've only been here for 2.5 years. How long have you been doing this for us?
20.
20. And have you been here?
I've been here here at Milburn. Probably 10 years.
In 10 years, have you ever had to come to us and say, hey, you guys are missing $3 million here, or you got a big boat here, or whatever?
No, never.
So,
No, and to be honest, the board is actually who hires us, so, we try to convey that to, we touch base with the board member always at the beginning of the audit. And, basically what I would tell a board member, I don't think I was the one that had this conversation this year, but what I always tell a board member is, if there's anything that you need to know, you're going to be the first to know, so, yeah, but no, in history here, absolutely. So, yeah, okay, good question, thank you. Anybody else? Thanks so much for being here. I love my job, I love what I do, so I really like to come and, share this with, so thanks again for having me.
Thank you for coming.
I'm glad you love this job.
Or if he's.
Somebody's gotta do it.
Makes this.
Somebody's gotta do
That
it.
was, you who served as the audit liaison this year? Yeah.
Did you talk about one, yeah? So, all right, thanks.
So this document and the Excel document that Kathy was talking about will eventually be posted to the district website sometime this week.
I was looking through, I can't find the page where I saw it, it says we spent like 300,000 on CDL or 325,000 on CDL tuition. Is that? Is that money that we pay or we get reimbursed for most of that?
Oh, no, probably special ed tuition, is that what you're looking at
Oh, there's a CDL line in here that I saw.
specifically, just state on?
No, it's 325,000.
Yeah, we owe dues to be a member district each year. That if you're, so some districts vote to opt out of CDL because like, oh no, we can do it cheaper in-house, or we have so few students enrolled compared to other schools. We then feel like they're subsidizing more, so. Then we also do rent out space to CDL, so we then get some of our classrooms, so then we get some income back. But there is an amount that we do.
I think I read about we're part of a group for that. I can't find that, probably, it's,
But yeah, we
it's
can-
leading to my question, will that go down because we're finding some of these, families that we talked about before are no longer in the district, or is that number just what it is and it doesn't matter how many,
That's a totally different,
it's totally separate.
yeah, totally.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, moving on. First reading of board policies. So we are not voting on these tonight. It's our first time seeing them. We are only going to have one meeting next month, in November because of the Triple I conference. So just getting, some of these non-action items on here to discuss now if necessary. The new ones are 4.120 and 7.60. Just changing some of the language in there, but if there's anything else that Ms. Peterson and Mr. Hamilton would like to chat about on those, or anyone else?
Jason, there's page 45.
All right. On to 6, action items, approval of school maintenance project grant application. As long as this is a state provided funding of matching up to $50,000 investment. So we have to spend at least 100,000 to get that full 50. So we try and find things for that. Ms. Kraft, is this something you are ready to present on?
Sure, so what opened, I believe it was a week or so ago, was the school maintenance project grant. We have to apply for it, but need board approval before we submit our application. What we're looking to use that money for this year is basically masonry repairs, so tuck pointing and movement joint replacement and precast sill joint replacement, which will be well over $100,000. About $140,000 in total, so the $50,000 would just offset the total cost of that.
And if we don't get, tuck pointing, it's not just about looking pretty, it's sealing joints, keeping water from getting in, and there's so few masonry houses nowadays that a lot of people don't have that experience. Is there a motion to approve, or are there any questions or comments on this application? Okay, do I have a motion to approve the school maintenance project grant application?
Sure, motion to approve the school maintenance project grant application.
I'll second.
Ms. Sully, this is just the application, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries, thank you. All right, 6B, approval of Wold Architects and Engineering Design Consulting Services proposal for MES Summer 2026 exterior improvements.
So in order for us to do this grant, we need an architect to design and do the builds. So that they can write the specs for how to, what work needs to be done specifically, because I am not a expert in tuck pointing. Carly's not an expert in tuck pointing, and neither is Tim, our head of maintenance, so we need somebody else to look at it, so we know what we're getting. In addition to that, we would like to hire, are we talking about the other project too tonight, or just this one?
Well, the Wold, proposal included the roof.
Okay, so
Overlay as well.
in addition to that, aside from, we're trying to keep separate the school maintenance project grant on one project. In addition to that, we'd like to take out of our capital projects cash, basically our reserve cash in that area, and do the roof on the oldest section of the building that's remaining. So that would be the east gym roof, which is old. It's 40 years old and it's a 15-year roof. And we're doing a lot of repairs on it every year, which isn't costing us a ton of money, but there is some water infiltration issues with that roof this time, and it's getting pretty fragile. Needs to be replaced, not replaced. Doing a layover, but anyway, they would also be writing up that bid process. The bid process timeline we'll talk about later, but it's going out now and then, or starting to write the specs for it now. Then we go out to bid, and eventually probably by March, we're looking at approval. If for some reason the roof comes in too high because everybody's too busy next summer, we can pull a plug on it at that time. If it's ridiculous, but we're not worried about that for the tuck pointing piece, because that's more of a minor project and there's more people available to do it, so. Not a problem. We're told it's not a problem anyway, so.
So Wold Architecture does the design because they're our architect of record. And if anything else needed to happen, that was a bigger scale, then we would have to bid that out.
Yes. Yes, we'd have to bid their work in addition to,
So it's like, thanks for the job, we're gonna see if someone else can do it cheaper.
right.
Okay,
Yep, if it got to be too big.
okay.
And they understand that.
Yeah.
So, the nature of requiring multiple bids.
And I don't know if you have to with architects, I could be mistaken on that, because it's a service.
Okay.
We would
Yeah,
want
I don't-
to.
I don't think we need to bid.
No, not on this.
No,
Not-
for the architect. work.
No, I know, not on that.
So the architect work doesn't have to be bid out, but the individual projects, the work that has to be done has to be bid.
Yeah,
Correct.
because it's above the threshold.
Did we talk about this roof before? I feel-
Well, there's so many different sections and
Yeah.
ages. They brought in samples possible, but. So like this year it might be, $1 million in repairs, and then in 2 years, 3 million, or then 600K here just to get over with.
Cause you did core sampling last spring, right? To see how bad it really was.
Yeah, we did actually, we've had 3 companies look at the roof. And give us an overview. 2 companies did core sampling. And 1 company did a scan where they do a heat scan of the roof, so if there's moisture in there, there's more heat leaking out through the top, or cold air in the summer. There's temperature differential, so that helps determine where the leaks are. And they'll do a scan. Part of the process is to scan it right before they put the layer on, so we're looking at doing an overlay, which means we don't have to tear off the current materials and insulation and do a complete tear off and restructure, which is great. That saves a lot of money. It's less than half the cost this way, and we still get a 20-year warranty on the new roof, so that's what we're going with.
Does that greatly increase the expense the next time when they have to
Yep.
take both layers off?
I don't know about greatly, but yeah. There'll be more down the road, but at the same time, you get 20 years on a which is a long time. This was a 15-year roof and we got 40, so
It's time.
maybe they'll wanna tear the whole building down by then, I don't know.
Any more questions on
Good
six B? So the approval for tonight is just to have Wold come in and kind of do the design consulting for it, not actually approving the project or final cost yet.
Yep.
Is there a motion to approve Wold Architects for this purpose, MES Summer 2026 exterior improvements?
Gonna move for the approval of the Wold Architects and Engineering Design Consulting Service proposal for the summer of 2026.
Second?
I'll second.
All right, Ms. Sully, please call the roll.
Jennifer Clifton,
Yes.
Chris Hamilton,
Yes.
Erica Peterson,
Yes.
Shirley Ann Phillips.
Yes.
John Ruggles,
Yes.
Brian Skipper,
Yes.
motion passed.
Okay, thank you. Next, six C, our first reading of the 2025 property tax levy. Ms. Craft, or is that?
Yep.
That's what I thought.
Pull up a presentation here.
Okay. No, for as long as I've been here, I don't think we've ever done the audit and the tax levy in one night, so.
We're ahead.
We're very lucky tonight.
First of all, the audit is
Yeah.
earlier and
Yeah.
on time.
Okay, so, each of you has a, document in front of you. It's kind of for educational purposes. So I'm just going to walk through it. The first page is just an introduction of what a levy is and why it's important. So the levy is the amount of property tax revenue that we are asking our taxpayers for to cover our expenses. The reason it's important is because it makes up over 60% of our revenue every year. Across the state, on average, it's about 65%. So it's something that's where we get the bulk of our revenue to cover our expenses. And if we scroll down just a bit, there's a pie chart comparing property tax to local, state, and federal dollars that we receive. The next page, we've covered it in prior board meetings. It's just a timeline of the tax levy calendar. The gist of it is that we have to submit the levy to the county clerk by the last Tuesday in December. So between now and that date, there are different reporting notifications that we're required to put out. But what we're really working towards is the December 15th meeting, I think, where, is it the 15th? Yes, where the levy, there will be a truth and taxation hearing, and we'll go over that in just a moment, and approval of the levy. Okay. The next two pages are basically definitions, again, keeping with just the educational part of it, but definitions and components. So we talked about what the levy is. The levy is our ask. The extension is what we actually are slated to get from property taxes, and that dollar amount comes to us from the county in March. So the levy is what we're asking. The extension is the get. Extension you'll see on the next page, and in the calculation, it's a component of the actual calculation. We require, or the state requires, something called a truth in taxation. If we are going to levy more than 105% of the previous year's tax extension. So this is not a rate limit, it's just a notification rule. And the very last word or definition there is fund. So we do fund accounting, as we saw in the audit report. Our revenues and expenditures are broken across 9 funds only. But we'll see this later in this presentation as well, on how the tax levy is broken out by fund. We move on to the next page. The property tax levy is made up of several components. One is equalized assessed value. So that's the taxable value of property within the district after the county and state equalization. The levy formula also uses the consumer price index, and it's looking at the increase between December 2023 and December 2024, which was 2.9%. This is going to be used in a formula coming up. And that formula is called the PTEL formula. So we are in a property tax extension limitation law, or a PTEL county. Essentially what that is doing is limiting the tax rate used for calculating the district's property tax levy. And that, if we scroll down just a little bit, keep going. That formula right there, the prior year's capped fund extension, so what we get times 1 plus CPU over the EAV less new construction gives us this limiting tax rate. And I'll show you where that is in the formula in just a moment. One last thing to note here, in the levy, new construction, it changes the increased assessed value of the property, and it can have a significant impact on the levy, and it did this year. So we'll jump into that next. So this page is the formula and how we calculate the tax levy. This is Milburn's formula. It's basically an Excel spreadsheet that's taking that PTEL calculation. But the first step there is taking the estimated 2025 EAV and the estimated 2025 new construction amounts. So we're really lucky in Lake County. The county clerk gives us both of those dollar amounts. So we take that information that the county gives us, put it into our spreadsheet here, take the capped levy from last year. So that's the extension, the 13.9 million is the extension that we were supposed to receive. Last year we received 99.4% of it. And then the CPI of 2.9. So step 2 is determining the amount the levy can increase. So we take the prior year extension and multiply it by 2.9%. The amount the levy can increase is just over $404,000. And then we determine the caps levy without new construction. So we take the caps levy plus the amount the levy can increase. So our new levy for this year, not including new construction, it's just over 14.3 million. Step 4 is determining that limiting rate. So we take the estimated 2025 EAV less new construction, divide it by 100 to get the assessed value, and then divide, it's saying row 10, but it's also actually row 13 by row 12. We get a tax limiting rate of 4.23. So keep that in the back of your mind for when we go to the next table. The levy generated by new construction, we take the estimated new construction amount. So that's a pretty high number. Typically, we don't see that. That's being driven by a third phase of Briargate and the townhomes, the Heritage Park townhomes behind Children of America. Again, that's divided by 100. Multiplied by the capped rate. So the property tax levy for new construction is just over $376,000. So the amount the levy can increase based on the current estimated assessed value is for just over $14.7 million. That's an increase of $780,000 from last year, which is more than 5%. So it's 5.6%, which is why we need a truth in taxation. So really what's driving that 5.6% right there is the new construction, because CPI was relatively low. Any questions on the calculation?
Carly, so are you saying our community's value is approximately $350 million
Yes,
of all our total?
all the total.
Okay, so next year, are we just taking out and putting it back in the new construction? So next year, basically, it's gonna be 348 plus 9 million is gonna be our EAV for next year.
Correct.
So you
Plus
just-
whatever increase the assessor gives to it.
So this will just be rolled up into EAV
Correct.
and
Plus any new construction.
Plus any additional new construction, which there is some.
no, but that'll have its own line.
It will.
Yep.
So
Yep.
EAV for next year should be 350 plus this
We hope
9,
it's 357-ish, but probably higher.
and then we'll have a new line for new construction if there is some, any.
It probably, I don't think it would be as high as this, but there should be some.
Yeah, I assume it's not gonna be near this, right?
I don't know if any big projects.
Yeah, I don't,
There may be some across from the townhomes that are going in now. Lindenhurst is looking to put in a whole new, I think 54 more units in there.
That wouldn't hit the tax.
But that'll be the following year probably?
The following,
Okay.
if they get them done next summer. So even some of the townhomes now by Heritage Park. There's a bunch of them that come on the books next year. And Briargate, because they're still building, so
so is this homes and businesses as well?
farmland,
But nothing's government owned because they wouldn't have to pay on that. Okay.
Here's a quick question. So we're doing the hearing because we want to increase taxes by more than 5%. I guess maybe this is an obvious question. We just always want to go for the maximum amount. Like, we could do it less, but we just want to go for the maximum to
Right.
get all the dollars. Okay.
And the reason for that, can you scroll up, I guess? Yes. A little bit more. Because the calculation is looking at what we received last year. We scroll up just a little bit more. Right there. We're taking that amount and increasing it or multiplying it by CPI, the lesser of CPI or 5%. So basically, if we made this 0, then zero multiplied by what we would be able to increase would be 0. If it's an extreme way to look at it, if that makes sense. So we want to maximize, we want to ask for as much as we can so that we can continue baking that number of that extension of what we get into the formula.
because
going
that,
forward.
yes, exactly, that would. Carry over into future years. As Carly's saying. So you would be determining your tax, lowering your tax rate, not just for 1 year, it'd be forever. Your ability to.
In short, we'll never ask for less than the maximum and nobody will because it
I
doesn't
just,
make any
this,
sense.
and again, it was an obvious
Now-
question. They're saying like you, if we didn't want to have the hearing or whatever, like we just
Oh,
always
sure.
want to go for the maximum amount, even if it's.
No, it would be unwise. And put the future district in a big bind. Even if, let's say we didn't need the 700,000 next year, which we will, but let's just, for argument's sake. We only needed the 376,000. Next year. Which is what? Less than a 1.8% increase overall on our budget. Which would be tight.
We always go for the most, but there is an argument out there that there, people would be saying, why are you going for the most when we don't even know we're gonna need it 5 years from now?
So, good question. So there's an answer to that. So I'm coming to the, if you didn't, let's say that we didn't, we only wanted the 3.7 instead of, or 376 instead of the 780. What I would suggest doing is collecting it all next year and abating it back. So you could, this spring or in February, the board could pass a resolution to abate. That means you're going to, in theory, collect it all. To keep your rate, to keep your ability in the future years to collect off that bigger number. But you're gonna give back in that 1 year. The $300,000 difference. So that would be my recommendation to do that, and school districts have done that, we have done that.
We have.
Twice, yes. So if we get to the point, because we've told taxpayers in the past, we're not gonna take anything more than what we need. And we've held to that mantra. We can give it back. So that, then it won't impact you down the road if you need it.
How much do we get back when we give it back?
1 year was 275,000, I think. Or was it more than
I
that?
think on our tax bill, we got somewhere between $250 and $300 back.
Oh, that would have been 800,000 then.
And if you do the abatement, that doesn't change what you can ask for going forward. It has,
Right,
okay,
Right, it's, keeps the bar up to.
It gives you more flexibility in the future.
okay, thank you.
It allows each board to make that decision each year.
What's the cost for giving an abatement? You need to give back 600,000, but it costs you 300,000 to do it.
No, zero. Yeah, it's because it's the county does it for us. The
Oh,
board just passes a resolution. There's no finance fee or anything like that.
No stamps and envelopes.
And we've done it, we've done it twice just in general, and then we've done 2 years in a row because we applied for and received the property tax relief grant. So those 2 years in a row where we abated back 800 or $900,000, 2 years in a row. That was relatively recently. So we had to, that was by statute, we had to do that. But even prior to that, way back,
If we hadn't done that, would we be putting a new roof on instead of relaying part of it though? I mean, this is the kinds of questions that are jumping into my head.
Well, but-
not related necessarily, but that's a good question. But if you did this, those are different circumstances, different abilities. Or different timings of when we get the money.
Mhm.
But moving forward, if you didn't take the full amount, maximum that you could. Yes, you're hamstringing yourself and you'd have to go back to the taxpayers and ask for a referendum.
Which
It
is,
doesn't make
which
any
is
sense.
even more unpleasant.
well, but then the argument against that is, why is a guy in
Right.
2015 paying for a roof in 2035? So, I mean, there's always arguments on both sides. I think we should always keep, you have to have our ability to do it. And I'm not even sure it's worth going, well, it's not even a hassle, I guess, to send $200 back.
The person with that argument though is misunderstanding how, things depreciate over time, right? But they're paying for the portion of the roof they're using, right? For the period of time they're here.
Well, now if they're using a leaky roof and paying for a new one 20 years down the road, and you're not paying for what you're using.
Well, you're
but-
paying for the school to not have water leaking into it because you continue to fund the school having a roof. That's kind of an essential element of the school, right?
I think we're
Yeah,
all in
100%,
agreement that we
same thing.
wanna,
We certainly don't want to
Bring the money
hamstring
in.
ourselves. I think we're in agreement on that.
We are, and I'm in agreement on most things. I'm saying there's ways that, as a side of. making
Yes,
sure
but
we're
I'm
not
gonna
taking
present
too
all
much
of those
money that we
arguments.
don't need At the time, we don't need it.
So what is the impact of the truth in taxation that we get to do?
I'll address that. What's that?
So what are the implications of the truth in taxation that we're going,
Nothing
hearing?
other than we have to have a
Yeah,
hearing and you have to
hearing.
put it in the newspaper and we do it every year.
last year, nobody came to comment about it.
We've done it every year. Except for one in my 15 years.
And so on a $5,000 tax bill going up 5% to
The hearing.
250,
The hearing.
The hearing.
Because at one year,
it seems like a lot when you say the 5%. Like, if you look at our whole budget per person.
there's a couple years where the CPI was like less than 1%.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no building happening, you're not gonna hit that. 5%, so we didn't do it. Maybe it was a couple years. But now with that new construction, we want to have it all.
Children in school, it's a bigger point, right?
And they were in the crowd when they. double this.
Okay,
Yeah, some schools actually
Yeah.
do a truth in taxation no matter what.
No matter what.
Yep, just for transparency. So if we scroll down a little bit, this basically just, this is the anticipated levy, so based off of the calculation above, it breaks it out across the 9 funds. But what we do here, and you can see that the 4.23, the limiting rate is there. The increase is 5.6% in the cell next to that, and that's why we need the truth in taxation. So this is the anticipated levy. Typically, what we get from the county is always really close to what the anticipated amount is. However, what we do is we actually balloon the levy. So we go down to the next slide. We ask for a little bit more because what we get from the county in September with the EAV and the new construction. It's just an estimate. So within the next month or so, they may have an updated amount, or as they continue working on the taxes over the next couple of months, they may have a slightly different amount of EAV and new construction. So we increase, or we ask for a little bit more by ballooning the levy and just in the off chance that the estimate could be higher, so that this helps us not miss out on any additional levy opportunity if the property values are higher than what was originally provided in the county's estimate. So the truth in taxation actually is would be asking for this ballooned amount. It doesn't mean it's what the county will give us. Typically, what I've seen is we get back that anticipated amount, or very close to what was on the anticipated slide. And then I think this last page is just an example of a home value in 2024 at $400,000. And then in 2025, it goes up 8.41%. So someone in a situation like that would see an increase in their property taxes of about $185.
So the taxes didn't go up 8.41%.
No, the home
The
value.
home value
No,
on
the
it.
home value increased, sorry.
It's about to be super clear.
Sorry.
I know.
That's what I
Yeah.
thought I said.
You might have.
I
I
don't
just want to reiterate that.
And
Okay,
then just the next steps, it's just the calendar again. So that's the levy calculation. Any questions? Okay,
all right. Okay, so 6C does not require approval. 6D, approval for posting the truth in taxation notice. I will move to approve the posting of the truth in taxation notice.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, motion carries. 6E, approval of the intergovernmental agreement with the Lake Villa District Library. This agreement allows our staff to utilize the resources at Lake Villa Library, even if they don't live within the Lake Villa Library District. Good for our kids. Yeah. Any questions? Is there a motion to approve the intergovernmental agreement with the Lake Villa District Library?
Motion to approve the intergovernmental agreement with the Lake Villa District Library.
Second.
All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. 6F, approval of emergency management plan. Dr. Lynn.
So we have to approve, board has to approve it every year. I sent it out, talked about it last month, so if there's any questions, be happy to answer them. We align with the state's plan.
Thank you.
Move to approve the emergency management plan.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. The approval of district reimbursement rates for meals during travel. Instead of having a fixed number, we will be going off of the government recommendation, the federal government recommendations based on zip code or major metro area. And there's also things in there like if your conference includes a meal with your registration fee, you don't get to expense that. If you're heading out on Thursday night, you don't get to expense a full day of meals for time you were at home, things like that. So, any questions on these updates? Since we are approving a policy and not necessarily expenditure of money, I assume a voice vote is acceptable for this.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, move to approve the district reimbursement rates for meals during travel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Approval of National Investigations contract for the 25-26 school year. So this is, for those of you who weren't on the board last year, it's a new company we purchased to help do residency verification. It's hard to put an exact dollar amount on the value they provide for the district. If somebody doesn't live here, they're not entitled to our services. We're still gonna have, teachers around. And so you can't, it's difficult to pinpoint exactly how much they saved us, but they did find, some individual families that were not, lawfully attending the school. And so, do you have the number on how much the
Yeah.
cost is? Okay.
Yeah. Fred asked me when we met earlier this week to see if I could put a number on it. There were 5. It's hard to say because some people, when we start the investigation, they drop their application, they're done and they're out. So we had some of those, but there were 5 students last year that as a direct result of using them were enrolled somewhere else.
Okay.
Didn't one save a huge transportation cost? Or am I thinking of
That
the
one
case?
needs to go to hearing with the region.
Okay, that would,
That hearing is over
All right, we can.
and we prevailed. And it's great. All good. That one worked out well. For them, for the family and for us. Yes, so there was 5 last year. Last year was the first year of doing it, cleaning up. So we started with 434 families that we had incomplete residency documents or leases that were expired. So we started there and narrowed it down from there. And then any new family that moved in, we verified. So we started there, and this year we only started with 37 families, so we're narrowing it down because we know, it was kind of a cleanup year last year. And now we're down to 59 new families, and they were all cleared by the investigation. So we're learning to use the process well and save the district a little more money.
I was
We
gonna
don't
say, I assume that means we pay them less for the investigation because we have significantly less people to investigate. Is that fair?
Yes, there's a couple different things. They run through a database, and I think that costs us $5 every time we run someone through it,
Mhm.
a family through it. Then they come up with evidence of maybe they're showing that they live in a different location, and then we just ask for more documentation.
Yeah.
It's a long process and it's different for each family, but there's one student currently that we have concerns about.
So on the cost benefit side, I mean, I know you said it's difficult to quantify how much value we get from the service. I don't know, I don't remember offhand what the amount was we pay for the service. We feel the cost benefit is there. Keep doing that, I assume.
I think another soft benefit is our administration doesn't have to do it.
We still-
Jason doesn't have to be.
Still,
He just has to knock on the door.
Right.
then.
I did.
Oh, okay.
Yes, he did, so now he does.
Well, that saves us $80 an hour. It's salary, so. Thank you.
Yep, I still do
Yeah.
it for some families. But not as much. No, I don't want to be knocking.
No, and you shouldn't be, I don't think,
No.
my opinion.
No, so it's working while we're learning how to use them effectively and efficiently. Veronica is the one that put all this information together. She does a lot of legwork with the company.
So you would recommend continuing this?
Yeah,
100%.
definitely. We want to have this option if we need it. For sure. The prices went up this year. They went from $60 an hour to $80 an hour. If they have to go out and, what they would do is do surveillance on a house and take pictures of a car in the driveway and then run the plates to see who's living at that address. It's just pieces of evidence that they gather and if they can put a story together.
So just a quick number crunching, if 5 students were found, we spend on average 23 grand per student. That was 115 grand that was being spent on them that is now being spent on other students. So it's not like we get that money back, but it's going to the students who are legally enrolled. That's just base expenditure without any other extended payment. Any other questions on the service?
I mean, there's not a direct way to calculate that cost, right? Because the teachers are in the room either way and things like that, right? Those are all averages, but
Yes.
I get it.
Okay, is there an approval for 6H, National Investigation Contract for the 25-26 school year?
Move to approve the national investigation contract for the 25-26 school year.
Second.
Ms. Sully, please call the roll.
Chris Hamilton,
Yes.
Erica Peterson,
Yes.
Jillian Phelps,
Yes.
John Ruggles.
Yes.
Fred Stephen,
Yes.
Jennifer Woodley,
Yes.
motion holds.
Okay, our consent agenda, 6I, approval of our minutes, paying everybody's bills and insurance, activities, get some new substitutes. We're hiring MVAC counselor. And the treasurer's report. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Ms. Sully, please call the roll.
Erica Peterson,
Yes.
Jillian Phelps,
Yes.
John Ruggles,
Yes.
Fred Stephen,
Yes,
Jennifer Woodley,
Yes.
and Chris Hamilton.
Yes.
Motion carried.
thank you. Okay, number 7, information and discussion. Mr. Walshire, would you like to? Or is that,
Yeah, why don't you
you
read it,
and
you know.
Mr. Person? Oh.
Well, in your next packet of stuff, that you're in front of you. So yeah, myself and Mr. Gorski are gonna share our school improvement plan. After we'll try to give you a signal of when to do the slides. In front of you is copies of the slide presentation and notes. That we'd like to do. Yeah, but we're gonna get right to it. So first off, I just want to acknowledge our school improvement team leaders. So we have representatives in all of our teams. That are part of our leadership team who helped look through our school improvement plan, identify goals and action steps behind those. So these are all of our members that are part of Wilburn Elementary, representing all of our teams. But one of the things I do want to mention is before we get into the school improvement plan, over the last several months, starting this summer, our district leadership team, which involved our school leadership team at the elementary and also at the middle school, got together and did some professional development over the summer about identifying highly effective teams. And so we looked at some key areas of what makes teams highly effective. Looking at shared purpose and goals, instructional planning, use of data, reflecting, learning and growing, time management, trust and accountability, and communication. And so we did some learning behind each one of those categories and designed a rubric of what we want to grow to be a highly effective school and with all of our teams. And so what you see there in those pages is our rubric that we created over the summer based on the learning that we did. And so once we designed this and looked at, where we wanted to lead to, then came our journey into where are we at with our rubric. And so we took that rubric and went to our staff, our certified staff, and had them identify where we're at in each one of those areas that we designed. And so looking at the results, our leadership team came back and we identified one area that we wanted to focus on this year. An area that we saw was pretty much that stood out for us was the use of data to make us highly effective. And so what we then did as our next step is look at key areas and what are our look for when we start looking at the use of data within our teams. And so we identified 4 areas that we wanted to focus in on when looking at data with our teams, which is having purpose, having consistency within the team and members of the team when looking at data, being vulnerable with looking at data, and responding to data. And so I won't go through each one of those bullets under each of those categories, but those are ways of how we're trying to tackle and look for us looking at data. So I just want to kind of share to start with that, how our leadership team is also growing and how they're going to build capacity within the teams they're representing, become highly effective in our buildings. All right, so I do want to start off with a review. I know a lot of you are new to the board, so I want to review our school improvement plan from last year. As Jake Jorgensen mentioned last week, MAP testing is the assessment we use within our district. And so here at the elementary, we look at MAP testing and obviously we use it for a variety of purposes. How are we doing for our core instruction? Are we are seeing successes with having a strong curriculum for the majority of our students. We also use it for identification purposes for tiered supports, remedial help or intensive help for students. And also assuring all students are making progress with their learning. And so all those key areas we can see within math testing. And so when we have been looking at our math tests, we want to make sure all of our students are growing, not just the lower end, not just the high end, but all of our students. And so for those of you that are not familiar with math testing, we do take it 3 times a year here at Elementary and our middle school as well, fall, winter, and spring. But in the fall, when students take the fall assessment, based on how they scored, NWA MAP gives them a projected growth target. And that sets the tone. That's based on where the normative data sees data throughout the entire country, looks at the historical data and sets a growth target. And so right there, that column right there represents a class and how many points a student should grow during the course of the year from fall until spring. And so at the end of the school year in spring, then we'll be able to see, do they hit their growth target? Pretty much it's yes or no. Some are sometimes close, some exceed it, some are right on, but it's a yes or no. Do they hit it or do they not? And then once we look at how many students, we then be able to see percentage of our students that met or exceeded their growth target. And so we've been looking at this data for a number of years, and this is our 12-year trends of number of students at Milburn Elementary that met or exceeded their growth targets, both with reading and math. And so you can kind of see there's been ups and downs over the last 12 years. The black line represents the national average. The national average is 50% of your students will hit or not hit their growth target. That's the average. So you can see where our school has fell in regards to in comparison to the national average. And so over the last several years, we've been seeing that trajectory go up. In the background, you can kind of see the trend line, both with ELA and reading. Notice at the beginning, our reading growth targets was a little bit higher than math, and now we are flip-flop over the last couple of years. So that is the percentage of students that have met or exceeded their growth targets, both with reading and math. So that's a little bit of background. So with looking at math. So looking at last year, we set a goal of 57% of our students would hit their growth targets in reading, and we actually had 63% of our students hit that. So we exceeded our goal last year. Those numbers represent from least to greatest, each grade level, and the numbers in percentage of students that met or exceeded their growth targets. So that was reading and math. We had a goal of 62%, and we exceeded our goal with 77% of our students hitting their growth target. And once again, from least to greatest, that represents each of the grade levels on the percentage of students that hit their growth targets last year in math. And again, as a reminder, 50% is the national average with that. So going into this year, so we're going to still focus in on growth targets here at the elementary. So we've set our goal this year to be 60% of our students hitting their growth targets in reading. Last year, we had set it at 57. And a couple of our goals this year, our action steps behind that goal in ELA. So our leadership team has identified different action steps to strengthen Tier 1 instruction. This begins with implementing our core curriculums with fidelity. Grade level teams co-plan units of instruction for reading that span reading and writing genres. Our core, which is our core curriculum for ELA, is a knowledge building curriculum where students read and write with authentic texts. Instruction is standards based, and student progress is monitored through administering common board assessments with our students. And additionally, all grade levels, we build on foundational skills such as phonemic awareness, phonics, vocabulary, morphology, and we teach those and practice them on a daily basis. Each teacher works with students in small groups, meets with them individually to monitor reading progress through IRLA, which stands for Independent Reading Level Assessment that we have on all students, K through 5. Teachers identify skills students need to work on in order to move to the next reading level by setting power goals with students. And additionally, team of staff have worked diligently to create and implement entrance and exit criteria for our students moving into additional support in our Tier 2 and Tier 3 of our multi-tiered systems of supports. Students receiving these supports are monitored throughout that time during their intervention. And then finally, we are also piloting our new resource this year called ARC Accelerator, with a few of our tier 3 intervention groups, as well as one grade level for our gifted learners. And this resource is intended for students in grades 3 and above, as it's designed to help maximize their learning and their progress. So it's something that we're gonna try out to see if that may work, and it might be something that we implement in the later years. So those are action steps with ELA. This is just some visuals of what we do when we look at data. Up to the top is our data wall when it comes to our reading levels throughout the entire school. We have a variety of different reading levels that goes across, but this captures where we're at any moment during the school year with our reading levels. So we can look at a school view, and then below is a student view of modern students' progress from not only from 1 year, but also look at their progress over multiple years. So we can look at it in a school lens, but also in a specific student lens as well. Moving into math, we've set our goal this year to be 65% of our students hitting their growth target. Last year, we had set it at 62, so obviously we want to keep on increasing that with our goals and being rigorous. So a couple action steps behind that. So we're in year 2 of our implementation of our new math program into math. And one of the things that we found is our teachers have been identifying that students are coming in with stronger prerequisite skills based on us implementing it last year. That's spending less time reteaching and going right into the core standards that we want to focus our time and energy on with that. So less pre-teaching skills and getting right into grade level standards. Our math committee with representatives from each of the grade levels are continuously going to be looking at our proficiency scales that we developed about 5 years ago, priority standards that we've set for our building. And now how is this aligned with our new curriculum? Do our standards that we have set and the proficiency scales, do they have enough rigor? And so we're gonna go back and revisit those, make sure that we have a high bar, that we continue to push our students to the next level. And once again, just like reading, we've identified entrance criteria for students going into tier 2 and tier 3 intervention supports, and making sure that we're looking at all students and identifying the right students for those levels of support. In addition, yes, we have standardized assessments that we look at as well. But we also want to look at our own grading practices, because that's in correlation of the response of our instruction to students is how they're responding to our assessments. And so when we look at assessments, we also look at our grades. And so we use standards-based grading here at Milburn Elementary. And we want to look at making sure that students are responding, and we know we have a high fidelity with our core curriculum by looking at 80% of students are getting to where we need them to be at based on our proficiency scales. And so when we look at our grading, this is an example of what we see within PowerSchool. This is just a quick little example where you can see a variety of different skills, but you see 3 skills that are the same, uses the coding skills, and there's 3 of them listed there. Because each one of those levels show what grade that they represented in that grade level. So this represents the first column, 2nd grade. And then the very top line is the percentage of students that had a 1 with that particular skill, which is attempting. And so out of 106 students, that just shows, all right, we have 11% of our students score on level 1. We had 25% of students score level 2, and then 64% score level 3. This is not where we're at right now. I just wanted to give you a visual of how we look at our grading practices and how students are responding to our assessments within each grade level. So that's kind of our ongoing tracking throughout the entire school year that we look at not only our ELA, but also our math standards in relation to how we're teaching. And once again, our ultimate goal is that in the level 3, which is meeting the standard, we want 80% of our students in each one of those skills to be out of 3. And then one of the things I wanted to know, writing is something that we want to tackle as a school. One of the things that was brought up this summer as we were developing the school improvement plan was a concern with writing stamina with students. And so we wanted to make it a goal, how do we increase writing stamina with our students so that they're fully engaged in writing. And so now comes, how do we tackle that? What do we look at? Because right now, the only data we have to look at is our own standards and our grading practices. Now, we do have IR information that we can use, but that's only 3rd through 5th grade within the building. And so one of the things we want to spend this year doing is collecting more pieces of data for us to take us on this journey with our writing. Because right now our writing is embedded into our core curriculum. which it's all correlating together with how they're responding to text and what they're reading. But now how do we take it to the next level? But we really need to analyze the data a little bit more. So that's where our journey is gonna begin. Getting, for example, one of the things that we wanted to start tackling is we need to look at exemplar work. Sorry, what does a 3 look like in each one of the grade levels and every piece of writing that we're gonna do with students? Once we get on the same page with that within our teams, we gotta make sure our students are aware. This is what a model looks like before we tackle a piece of writing. So they know somewhat of an idea of what they need to achieve over a period of time. But again, this is gonna be a multi-year process. Because we definitely want to go back into our standards that we've developed, that align with Common Core to make sure this is exactly where we want to be at with our writing. Because right now, we do not have a standard on the report card that addresses writing stamina. It's right now more of the skills within writing. So if we want to make sure that students are engaged with the writing and there's some meat to it, we got to make sure if we're going to possibly could add it to the report card, but we need to really kind of see where our students are at with writing overall in general. And kind of build from there. So there's not necessarily a set goal right now because we need to start looking at what our baseline is. But I want you to be aware that writing is something we're going to tackle over the next few years. So with that, then going to the next part, I'm going to turn over to Mr. Corsi. He's going to look at how we're increasing our sense of belonging.
I've got slides 22 through 91. So I'm gonna talk a little bit our increasing our sense of belonging, and that's through our students, our staff, our community, our, everybody that's involved here and their parents. So first off, we're gonna talk a little bit about education for all, and we're doing that through access and opportunities. So auditing access points, that means basically we're reviewing who is and who isn't represented in enrichment, leadership, other programs like our club, student council, tier 3 supports. So really looking at who are involved. Flexible intervention models, that means allowing students to move in and out of our support tiers fluidly based on program data rather than the fixed labels. So really looking at that, ensuring resource equity, balancing staffing, materials, instructional supports. So paraprofessionals' time, sensory tools, reading materials, all of that balancing and giving it out appropriately. Language access, translate family communications and provide translators for conferences and events. And then culturally responsive libraries, audit classrooms and media center materials to make sure reflecting diversity in authors, cultures, and identities. And so other ways that we're also having education for all is in our instructional practices. So this year we started embarking in our adventure with UDL, our Universal Design of Learning. And administratively and our coaches team met over the summer and we were working on the UDL playbook that we worked over and really are looking at how we're going to help our staff universally design for learning for all students and include everybody. And right now our staff is working through this book with the coaches and administration on what that looks like. So when we talk about the UDL principles, it's multiple ways for students to access learning and content, how they can express their understanding and how they're engaging in it. So different, giving them opportunities to respond differently, to learn differently, to choose their learning and to reflect on their learning. Co-planning with specialists. We're encouraging classroom teachers, EL, special ed staff to design lessons together rather than pulling out in isolation. Monitoring participation patterns. So looking at who's responding in class, who's being called on or featured in examples, and adjust routines to distribute voice equitably. And then we're implementing data conferences. So that's using data to not to label, but more to identify instructional next steps and the supports for growth. Another way now we're building positive relationships. Lots of ways we're doing this. Some of these are, you can go to the next one. Some of these we've done in previous years and we're just building on what has been successful, what we've heard, what we got feedback from. So parent involvement, like grade level parent events, Milburn Showcase, childcare for parent events. We started that last year and we noticed when we started having that childcare during parent events, it increased the turnout for parent night in September. So we're continuing that. Classroom, daily classroom circles, staff learning and using student interest and background in their planning. And then things like mystery readers and first chapter readers on Friday. School-wide things that we're doing, MTS Wednesday meetings. We meet for ELA, math, behavior gifted. So the multi-tiered systems of support, the teachers are coming together to discuss what are we doing best for our students, what directions are we going in. Marigold Committee, that's kind of a staff committee for staff events, activities, team building, things, ways that we can give back. And restorative practices, we're replacing that punitive discipline with restorative approaches, and that's building community and address the root cause of conflict rather than always responding and reacting. We're being proactive. And then community-wise, we just implemented Facebook at the beginning of this year so that everybody in the community can feel part of the day-to-day interactions and celebrations. We have community events like Veterans Day celebration. We've had the Martin Luther King Jr. event. And then visibility, our staff and students are trying to be visible at the fundraisers and epic social events like Wendy's night and back to school night at the park. So again, increasing that sense of belonging. So some new action steps we just started this year. A few weeks ago, our 2nd through 5th graders were administered a culture and climate survey through something called My Savers. It's a program that we're using. And in My Savers, we're going to be doing this about 3 to 4 times a year. And it looks at 3 different domains. So we have a social behavior domain, an academic domain, and emotional behavior domain. And the social behavior domain is the student's ability to understand social norms, empathize, and understand the perspectives of others. And there's 7 questions that deal with that. The academic behavior domain are skills necessary for students to be prepared for and participate in and benefit from academic instruction. There's 6 item questions in that. And then the emotional behavior domain has 7 items, and that's the student's ability to regulate internal states, adapt to change, and respond to stressful and challenging events. So it's a 20-item scale that the students answer questions on their iPad. And if you go to the next screen, we received most of the data. I think we're still waiting for a couple of classrooms. So right now it's hard to see because the pictures are up there, but in front of you on the top right, it shows we can identify our low risk, our some risk, and our high risk students. And then if we look at our high risk students, we have 5 students that kind of fell into that category. So that's 1% of our elementary 2 through 5th grade population, 21% at some risk. And so 80% show strong social emotional programming. So we're looking at that 80%, but what do we do with those other students and how do we support them? So the next slide gives you first some examples of kind of what the questions are and what the students see on their iPad. So it's meant to be kind of user friendly for them. And then once the survey identifies these students as being at high risk or moderate risk, then we intervene with potential supports like connections. Connections is that increased daily positive feedback from adult in the building. Usually it's their social emotional partner. We mentioned at the beginning of the year, we usually have 2 adults in the classroom at the beginning of the day, working with the social emotional circles. And that's their connection partner, is that just increased work with them. They could be put into maybe something like modified connection. So that's increased positive feedback from an adult, but also connecting at a specific time during the day. If we're seeing that they're struggling during recess, maybe that adult kind of meets with them before recess, talks about what are some of our rules and expectations at recess, what kind of recess day are you going to have, and maybe connects with them again after recess to see how it went and reflects on that. And then we also have a group that they could go to, it's called BEST groups. BEST stands for behavioral, emotional, social teaching. And these are small groups that are focusing on social emotional skills, identifying feelings, how to regulate, things like that. And then that's just at a more intense, smaller group that we work through about 7 lessons of those. So that's kind of what we do with that information. And Savers is newer to us this year. So we're learning all the ways that we can look at that information too. That's how we're gonna connect and increase our sense of belonging. So, do you have any questions for either of us?
I do.
Go ahead, Mr. Ruggles.
I'll start with the second part, because I think the program's great, especially when you want to identify people with high risk of certain behaviors. I get nervous, we start labeling people. And I get, so the 2 questions I have is, if we label someone, let's see, I can pick a term, but if we have someone in a high risk group, is that following for school?
Like documentation purposes and things like that. Well, I can tell you right now, more of our documentation is with an internal aspects, like more than just social emotional support, there's also academic support. And so there's been talk about, all right, if if a student moves, like, I'm just using this for example, not necessarily moving from one, moving up in the community or things like that, but a student move, how would the next school know if they needed that support? Or they left the school in intervention support, either academics or social behavior. So there's value behind at least having some information in there that goes through that. But right now, we don't have currently something in the CUNY files for a student that it's more for our internal purposes. But there's been talk about how do we make sure that the next school knows that they have that support? It's one thing when they move from elementary to middle school, we already have that internal communication. And when they go to middle school to high school, they still have that CUNY file, so they have that historical aspect. Right now, we currently do not have that information in CUNY files. But we've been talking about how do we make sure if somebody moved, they at least have that information that they had some support before they left us, and they knew what to prepare for if they came to the new school district.
And some of these things that we do, once we identify it, we involve parents, I assume.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Every single one.
And even within our internal, I mean, because some people, some kids maybe in second grade might be high risk. By the time some of these action items that we do kick in, by the time they're in fourth grade or fifth grade, they're not high risk anymore, or at least that's the hope.
Yep.
So then how are they, so that they don't continue,
So it's kind of like what we were talking about before too, about the fluid and using data to make decisions. So even without Savers, before Savers was even here, we have connections, we have,
Those interventions.
those interventions, and they're not meant to be long-term. They're meant to see just an added level of support. If it's working, then we'll continue maybe that support, then we'll take them out of, say, connections, but the teacher still knows, okay, that student needs every day for me to just tell them have a great day. You know, it's just that low level of support that they just need that, and they're not officially in connections anymore. After, you know, maybe 6 or 7 weeks of best groups. They've done some of those lessons, they're able to regulate some of their emotions, maybe they don't need anything more and there might be out of that. So it is fluid, and then we look at the data, how are they responding to that, and then we decide what we do.
But maybe John, what you might be hinted at is that, all right, somebody was in second grade. They got some support with us both and they're not on the radars for a couple of years. What if something else comes up about, like all of a sudden we identify them as another risk factor? Can we go back and look at some historical information? Is that kind of what you were looking at?
that's part of it, yes.
Yeah, so there is some value at least having some historical aspect behind it to see like, all right, what was tried before? What didn't work out and things like that, because, you know, we might have some information that might help if we added another intervention later on. After they were found to be successful, because sometimes, all right, they were identified early on at the elementary. They built and they got stronger and they were at no risk. And all of a sudden, they transitioned to middle school, maybe there was a risk now. You know, maybe that kind of identified some of a red flag. Well, then we can go back and kind of say, all right, what happened in second grade to kind of see what worked, what kind of support, so we're not reinventing the wheel. But sometimes we do have to experiment with kind of interventions, what works for a student. And if we know something worked earlier on, do we at least try that first? Instead of experiment.
So let's say you have a few second graders and then they move into the middle school. Are you guys saying, okay, Jake, here's a box of high risk people, even though they might not be? You know what I'm saying?
No,
No, because it's usually continue on where they ended up fifth grade. So for example, we always communicate with fifth grade, here are students that we identified at the end of the school year that were receiving support. And so they may not need it right away. So there's a different entrance criteria process behind that aspect. And so they may not need that at all. It's not necessarily automatic when they move from elementary to middle school.
no, they'd have to go back and look for that information. And be flagged for trouble. Or not that the kids are in trouble. But there would be some sort of concern that would bring that to light first. By behaviors that they recognize at the middle school. It wouldn't be not what you're talking about.
Moving on to yours, or what you presented, how do you guys determine what your goals are? You say you look at all this data and you set goals and make recommendations and you know what your next action steps are. You guys kind of just look at the data and then make
So
those.
we review how, Like, for example, we didn't start really looking at NWA growth targets till a few years ago. And so we had some discussion about that, like, all right, and I'll express one of the concerns behind it is when they hit a growth target, like I mentioned in that one report, it's a yes or no. If somebody had a growth target of 10 points, if they got 9, one, that's a celebration. They grew by 9 points, but they didn't get the 10. So according to that report, it's a no. But they were so close. So for many years, we were looking at the growth percentile of our building. Was how many students and looking at their growth, which is then put in a big pot, and where's their growth in this building compared to others in the country. So then we look at percentiles. And so we did that for a while. For our teaching staff, we got some feedback from our teaching staff saying, I don't get this whole percentile aspect and this comparing aspect. How do we get something that we understand? And so then we took on our journey about looking at growth targets, which is very cut and dry for our teachers. And so that took us on that journey. I'm like, let's try focusing on growth targets and setting that. So then we went back, like, what is the historical trend? And so that graph, we went all the way back from 12 years ago. It's something that we didn't have. We went back to the data to kind of see where is our trends behind this? Is this something that could be a goal for us? And earlier on, we saw the ups and downs. As you saw, things dropped during the COVID years. And we were on that upward trajectory before COVID. And we took that drop. Is it something we want to possibly focus in on and get us back to where we were before COVID? That's how we identify that as our goal.
You guys also have a goal of using data more, and I'm just gonna ask, and everybody in this room's gonna get tired of me ringing this bell for the next 2 years, but have you ever considered taking the data that you have, dropping it into an AI model, ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, or whatever, and saying, hey, what should we do with all this data? What should our goals be? What should our recommendations and next steps be? And compare it to what you come up with.
We haven't talked about that. That's fascinating.
So my question is not exactly that, but kind of. And, looking at how well the kids did and looking at the goals that were set, and you actually set the goal lower than what they achieved.
Right, so that was one of those things of, it was higher than our goal from last year. We keep that trend moving on. There's still some hesitation right now, like, all right, we've been doing good the last couple of years. We've exceeded, well, at least math, we've exceeded our targets. Do we keep on pushing over that? We're still not comfortable yet of saying, all right, we're gonna be over that this year. Because, yeah, we've been good over the last couple of years with exceeding that. Is that enough data point to say, all right, last year we had 77% of hit their growth target in math. Do we make it 80? 80 is pretty high. We want to keep on that trend, but there's also an element of just like, all right, when do we get to the point where are we thinking that it's gonna be 100%? I don't know if that's realistic to say we're gonna be at 100%, but how do we keep on pushing that envelope a little bit more? Because there could be some fluid aspects behind it. And so,
We had a group at 87%.
Right.
That's amazing.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And when you look at that, especially math, especially when you start looking at percentage of students hitting their growth target, what is considered average and above average? Yeah, 50% is right in the middle. So all the way up to the 66% of students, that's the average range. Most of our grade levels were above the average.
Right.
And it was like, okay, all right.
Yeah.
And so it's also year 2 for math. And so we kind of like typically, I think it's, we shared this last year, we shared this, that sometimes when you implement something new, you're gonna start seeing your squares change. Were we shocked after the first year of implementation? Absolutely. But it's still too early on, in our opinions, to say, all right, what's gonna happen this year with year 2? We might see more successes, that could be great, but.
So you're playing double dutch right now, right? Yeah.
I mean, realistically, there's an upper bound to where this would go, right? I mean, 100% is not your natural cap,
Right.
but realistically, it's not gonna get to 100%, right? So
So,
setting goals too high and continuing to fail is not good either.
no, and so we might navigate away from pro targets and really hone in on specific areas. In that aspect. Even though we have, this NWE, assessments 3 times a year that, all right, are we still solid? At least it's a good reflection for us as a school, that our core curriculum's there. But as a school improvement team, where we need to hone in, we might find, all right, let's break down math even further. Yeah, they hit their growth targets, but let's look at numbers and operations, and maybe that's where we hone in at that area. And it's, as you start looking at K through 5, each grade level can develop their school improvement goals, because every grade level has a certain area they want to see improvement on. And so we try to capture that information as part of our discussions over the summer. How do we build together and work together? Because we talk a lot about ELA and math. We have representatives from specials on our team helping us develop that are part of that. How can they be a part of that process with our building and say, all right, we can do some cross-curricular aspects within our settings, within music, art, PE. If we want to work on basic facts, is it something we could do within PE class, talking about basic facts? This is where we all want to try to work together to make sure this is our solid goals moving forward and everyone's all in with.
Oh, we're done, John.
I have one last short one just for my own personal.
Yes,
Do we teach cursive and why don't we real fast?
we do teach cursive.
Okay.
We do teach
Oh, that's the
cursive.
other question. Why do we?
It's a state
Law.
mandate.
Yeah.
When do we stop teaching it? Like third grade?
Well, here's the thing, when it comes to cursive, we have to teach the skills behind it. Now, the question is the reinforcement of cursive. And where does, we have curriculum that we use with our students to teach the basic foundation behind it. But then after we teach it, do we still reinforce that? Do we still expect that within their writing samples in 4th grade and 5th grade? And this is one of those things that administratively we've been talking about. Technology is not coming to play. And all right, we have the devices with our students, and things like that. That where are things going to navigate with our expectations when it comes to handwriting? So it's something we still have the expectation that we teach we teach cursive, we teach them the skills behind that. Now, where does it go from there? Where is it? That's one of the things that we haven't necessarily clarified as a district on. This is what our expectations are. By the time they get to 8th grade, we still want to see that writing within cursive behind that, because we are seeing a lot of things now becoming more electronic.
So that's not part of this writing.
It is not. No, this is more of the content behind writing. So when we talk about writing statement, that also includes typing and making sure they're engaged with the content that they're putting into the writing.
Yeah.
This question is probably not important, but you did mention, so I was curious, you mentioned the inflection point where your reading targets fell below your math targets, where those used to be inverted, right? And trend lines changed. I'm just curious, did that coincide with the introduction of a new math program or some change on either side, or was that just an anomaly of the data?
Good question. I don't know if I can answer that right offhand. Here, at least I can tell you about the timelines. Okay, so, 2019-20 is when we began to implement the new reading program, our core. So, of course, it was right the same year that.
I think right in your COVID, yeah.
Right, and so, a lot of rigor behind that, student interest and rich texts that are being incorporated with that. And Dr. Lynn, I might need your help when, my math was introduced. It was before I was here in 2014.
2013, 14,
Was it 2013 we
2012,
implemented
13,
my math?
some,
So my math was beginning then, and then we switched, and then we pretty much up until last year is the first year of the new math. And so, I don't know if I can quickly answer why that flip flopped.
It's not that important either. I was just.
No, it
curious.
is. I've been wondering the same thing. Like, yeah, it's now, because if you start looking at that trend line for math, it's a little bit steeper than the ELA. Like, we're starting to see that steady growth with ELA, but it's not as sharp as what we're seeing with math.
It's a national trend too. We're seeing math scores across the country have dropped in the last 5 to 10 years.
But on the flip side, I think Dr. Lynn mentioned this when IR results came out. This is math testing, and we're seeing that, and we're seeing some great successes with math and reading, but IR results flip flops. We're actually stronger with ELA than we are with math.
This was gonna lead directly into my next question, which was a lot of this data academically is tied to the standards. That's what we're measuring against, right? Obviously, you guys are measuring against our own grades.
So,
It's like that
that's
too.
another great question. So, when it comes to math, so math is computer, adaptive, and it's not a grade level assessment. Their scores are compared to other students at their grade level, but the questions that are being asked
are not necessarily grade level questions. They might get a fourth grader, might get a fifth grade level question, they might get a third grade level. You have to gauge where their skills are at. Where IR is grade level criterion. This is being assessed at these grade level standards. And so that's a little bit of a difference between the two assessments that we have, where, yeah, NWA has the data, has norm data, their research that they've done that this can correlate with those aspects, but we always got to keep it in mind, it's not a grade level assessment.
Gotcha. And then just one question on the My Savers side of stuff. I know you guys did identified 5, students, 1% in the high risk category. Obviously, these are self-reported responses to the assessments. So do we do anything, I'll use an unscientific term, like a gut check at some level to say, does that represent what we think we should see from the students? Because obviously, we could have students struggling who are smart enough to answer these questions in a way that they, because they're trying to avoid having to deal with some of that stuff. Do we feel that we're capturing a good percentage of the kids who are at risk through that self-evaluation? Or do we think that potentially there are kids slipping through the cracks because self-reporting, they don't want to answer these the way that
And
would indicate that?
the way that I would answer that is, how we're approaching it even with academics. We use universal screeners. We're gonna treat My Savers as a universal screener. But relying on one universal screener should be the only thing. You need to look at 2 to 3 universal screeners to really, are we capturing the right students, academic supports and behavioral supports? And so Savers is new for us. I can tell you, Mr. Corsi and I looked like, this is the first time, who are those 5? Is it ones that we're familiar with
Right.
and things like that? And no. And these are like, okay, these aren't on our radars. What's going on? So we have to get some more information. What does behavioral information say? Are they getting referrals and things like that? We gotta talk to the teachers behind that. And so getting those doesn't mean they're automatically gonna be put on those supports.
Right.
Like, there has to be more to the story besides reacting to one piece of data.
Right.
There's gotta be something else.
I do think it's excellent you're finding students who aren't being picked up in any other way, right? Because those are the students likely at the most need, right, for these things that are really falling through the cracks.
And referring to what Suzanne was talking about, that's where education for all and looking at all students. Because we want to make sure we identify the right students that need that support. Yes, some piece of data may not line up and things like that. But we have to look at all students because, yeah, I will safely say sometimes, in years past, the only times we would hear those names is because either we heard the loud voices, like this person needs support. And so we have to treat everyone with the same, with looking at the big picture of all of our pieces of data. What else are we looking at? And then when we identify those universal screeners, that's where the entrance criteria comes in. What are we looking at? And yeah, we might have a flag here, but is that enough of a flag to say they need this support? It might be something that we may say, all right, we're gonna monitor, we're gonna get kind of check. They may not need that intervention, but it's at least on our radars for right now. And that's the worst thing that comes out of it, that's fine, and we note that,
Right.
with monitoring that progress.
You only do it once, because they might answer a question one way on one
3
day.
times a
You
year.
know, this is our first time, so our plan is to do it 3 to 4 times a year, to kind of see. And to be honest, we had to reflect ourselves of like, is this a good tool for us? We knew we needed to get some information, we needed to hear from students. We might find that, yes, this is becoming a great tool for us, we want to continue utilizing it. Or we may say, is there something else we gotta look at? This is something we had in our hands, because we already work with the software for other progress monitoring, especially with academics, and they had this feature. And so let's take a look at, is this something that could help us with identifying students? Because when we started looking at it, we had an expert come in and talk about students that may need those extra connections around the building. And when we shared some of our preliminary data, like, there's something you guys are missing. How are you guys going about identifying students, which took us on that journey? Like, how are we relying on this? Are we just relying on behavioral referrals? We gotta get input from teachers, we gotta get input from students, we gotta then talk with parents. Is this something that they see and things like that? So they're involved in that process. Because I can tell you to that question, like, are parents involved? Anytime there's intervention in place, we gotta make sure they're involved in that process. We've had parents say, no, they don't need interventions. Okay. We still have concerns and we need to make sure we express them, but they have a right to say, all right, they don't need those aspects. But we also wanna make sure we can show our case to them and say, this is the reason why. And sometimes they align, sometimes they don't. But it's important that we want to have buy-in with them as well, because we want to support their child in every aspect, academics and the behavioral.
Awesome, thanks. I think it's excellent that you guys are doing it.
Thanks.
Can I ask a quick question? So you said that one of the long-term goals was writing stamina, and I'm just curious, is that just what it sounds like writing coherently for extended period of time, or is there something special?
As we start breaking down, that was the initial concern that was brought up over the summer. But as we've been talking over through this last few months, it's like, all right, is it engage in writing and long-term, like I'm just gonna write, or is it more of the content that they're putting into that writing? Not necessarily like, we need you to write for 40 minutes. What's going on in that 40 minutes? And so we're really kind of breaking it down, like initially, we were talking about stamina, but it's more looking at more in depth of like, what's in the piece of writing? If they're responding to text, if it's responding to a narrative, responding to an opinion writing, all right, what's in there when it comes to what we expect from them? And do we know what we want to share with students with what needs to be in the writing? And if we can make sure all those steps are clear cut, that might serve the purpose of the writing stamina issue that maybe we're observing. Right now, it's observational data that we're seeing. Now, if that's something we want to try to capture, what else do we need to see within our writing? Because we might find out it's not necessarily the stamina, but it's more of, we got to look at a certain area within writing. Is it because they don't know language arts and grammar to put sentences together and things like that? It's really kind of breaking it down, which that's where it's going to take us on our journey. Because right now it's observational. We're seeing, oh, kids aren't writing. We'll say write something and then they're done in 5 minutes. Well, is it truly the stamina, or we gotta create that exemplar for them of like, this is what we expect. This is what we want to see in our handwriting. For example, our ELA committee, we created a checklist, K-2 checklist and a 3-5 checklist when it comes to what we want to see within writing, specifically writing conventions. You know, when it comes to capitalization, punctuation, because the kids needed to identify and do some self-reflection of, this is what I need to have in writing. Okay, that's the language arts aspect between writing. Now, when we create that same thing when it comes to content within the writing. Do I have, for example, if we're talking about a narrative, are we using characters within that? Are we having some sequence of events within a narrative and things like that? Those are the things that we need to make sure we incorporate within the writing, which might take us on a journey. It's just too early on to say that. Right?
Do you mind if I jump in on your question?
Yeah.
Along with that, I'm just curious, are you guys evaluating, are you guys looking at the writing elements of this digitally as they're doing on their tablets, or are you also doing this outside of that? Because I know with a daughter who does writing on that, right, the device does a lot of the punctuation and the spelling corrections and all of this, and when I give her a piece of paper, it's a very different piece of writing. And I, personally, maybe because I'm old school and I was raised before AI and all this, right? For me, I want to see her to have the ability to do that coherent writing, with punctuation and with grammar on her own, outside of the assistance of those tools.
So right now, that's a careful balancing act that we're having within our grade levels. Now, we'll probably seeing that more apparent with actual paper pencil type of writing more in the younger grade levels. As they get older, we're starting to see less and less of that, and that's now more electronic, and that's where they get the help. I take advantage of it multiple times.
Right. And maybe that's fine because that's the way the world's heading. I don't know,
But-
right? Like cursive, maybe that needs to go away at some point. But, professional writing is an important skill and feels like it's lost in this age of iPads and auto.
Well, I can at least tell you that our stance right now, we still feel value of having the paper pencil type of aspect behind it. And not just automatically going to the electronic, and then there's the self-correcting with punctuation and identifying, which is a great tool, like, oh, there's an error. But you know why there's an error,
Right.
right? Spelling's the same way. Spelling has been a topic for us for a number of years of like, all right, what's the purpose of spelling? Years ago it was, there's your 20 words, memorize them. They memorized them, they did great. 2 weeks later, you asked them to do the same thing and they didn't. It didn't really sink in. So now we've really captured what is the skill behind spelling? And that comes down to that phonics aspect. So am I using my skills to help identify how to spell words versus memorizing words? And that's where we've kind of moved to over the last 5 years.
Anything else?
That's part
Yeah,
one,
yes,
so part two.
We'll consider that in the November meeting. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
How about have your teachers use regularly or previous, or you know, something, right?
Oh, yeah.
Next,
Some principals use that.
Yeah.
our house lease extension, the school district owns the residential property, on this land parcel. An employee lives there and they provide the service of kind of checking in on the building and unlocking it on the weekends and after normal school operating hours. Their lease is coming up and every few years, then they'll do a lottery of other interested parties in the district. I think last time there were 3 interested parties. So that will be coming up. Do we have a date on that?
Yeah, next meeting.
Perfect. Oh, have you already held the lottery?
No,
No,
it'll
okay.
be at the next
It'll
meeting.
be, okay, got
So
it.
if the board's okay with it, I'll send out the application tomorrow.
No objection, it's not something we can vote on to that.
No.
Any questions on that process?
Yes.
And if we were to rent it out for income directly to an individual, then we would have to pay property taxes on that piece of land and building. So this way we also then.
The taxes are expensive in our district.
Yeah.
It's hard to cover that with rent.
Questions on that or anything else to add in? The next one, the countywide penny sales tax. Before it gets added on to a county referendum, then the individual member districts representing at least 51% of the population of students, the board must vote to get it on there. For things like this, for this specifically, I think we would get around 400 grand based on, it's a per cap per students. Is that what you have up there?
I don't have the money.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alright,
I think I read 400 something.
Yes, I've heard that too.
Correct.
so that's something that,
$400 per student. And we have 1,000 students, so 400,000 for us per year.
adds up.
Would be amazing.
And then that is, that can't go into our gen ed fund that's specifically for, like physical improvements to the building, so roof, parking lot, security cameras, shatter resistant glass, things like that.
What are you hearing from the other district, Jason? Are they supporting?
There's a lot of support so far, but it's early.
There's already 67 counties in Illinois that have it.
I get nervous when they say something's only for education. Like our tolls and our
Right.
lottery tickets and this. and all
This
of
would be a
sudden it goes
direct-
Somewhere else.
This would be a direct pay.
That would be
It's
cool.
not going to Springfield and back. That's the difference.
That would be awesome.
That would be nice.
That would
When
be
do
great.
boards need decide on this stuff?
We haven't put an exact timeline on it, but soon, probably January. The resolutions wouldn't have to be till later than that, but we'd wanna know.
So the county's trying to get in April.
No, it'd be for the general election next fall.
Okay. Alright, anything else? Questions on that? Wonderful. And well, yeah, aside comment on that, we also don't have a lot of commerce here in our district. So, a lot of the people then go to Gurnee and people who live here or wherever spend a lot of money there. And it helps bring that back into where we are. Cool. FOIA requests. Nothing controversial. Data agencies, data brokers, I guess. Questions on that? Future agenda items, our 7 to 10 year maintenance project plan. What we need to do to keep students safe, warm and dry. And our school calendar coming up for the 26-27 school year. We usually approve that around February, I feel. Maybe January,
Calendar,
yeah.
December,
Oh, well, all right then. Sounds good.
hopefully.
Dr. Lynn, would you like to give a report?
Very brief, we are switching over from School Messenger to something called Messages XR. So we're using a different format for sending out communications from school to families. That flip is gonna have to happen by the end of this week, because we're losing our school messenger service, so just letting the board know. We'll send out some information about that to parents, and by next week, hopefully, we'll also have an app. That you can go to the app store and get, that's a Milburn app, so it's just for our school, just for our parents. And you'll be able to download that, well, grandparents can do it too. And a lot of our content on our website, we push through the app, and any alerts would go through that as well. And this new messaging service also lets us text parents with any alerts if you sign up for it, so you'll be able to control what you see and what you don't want, but it's, once it's up and running, it's gonna be a little bit. Yeah, there's transition. It's gonna be,
Exciting,
it's
super excited.
super exciting,
Oh, nice.
and it'll be very nice. But a lot more control over who gets what eventually.
Yeah.
It might be everybody all at once the first time, but. Once we get it rolling, then you'll be able to control as a parent, what calendars you wanna see and what alerts you want to pop in.
That actually will be.
Not the fair.
Yeah. And right to your phone instead of having to remember to go into the website, and check stuff. That's it.
Ms. Kraft.
I have nothing more to share.
Thank you.
Are you sure?
Board reports.
Girls cross country, 8th in the state, ooh,
Oh, all right.
continuing on the Milburn tradition, the team took 8th,
That's better than expected.
yes, they rocked it.
Sweet.
Awesome.
I attended the Frisbee golf field trip, which was
Oh,
quite
that's
enjoyable.
cool.
Yeah, we had, I
Perfect.
think the kids had a lot of fun, the first annual, I hope.
First one.
Where'd you go to?
It was at the Round Lake, source, which I guess is one of the top in the nation, so it's apparently appears in video games for Frisbee golf and other things, it's apparently very well known. There were a lot of very serious disc golf players out there while we were out there.
There's a course right across from the middle school.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
I never see anybody on it, but I know the courses.
That's pretty small, yeah, I've done that one.
What else? I had, not too busy. I did the Buona Epic fundraiser. Saw a bunch of families there, some teachers as well. So that's nice to see, the teachers especially, they don't need to pay extra money. There was the Lake Division meeting for IASB. Ms. Quickly and Dr. Lynn were also there. There was the math fair at the Lakes High School that Antioch and Lake students invite kindergarten through sixth graders to come do math problems, win carnival prizes. A lot of familiar faces there as well. And the Lindenhurst Park District Fall Fest, a lot of familiar faces also. Even when you're doing things with your family, you're still a board member. That's smart. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, have a great night, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Sam,